welcome everyone. I want to add to Lance's welcome and say thank you for being here. So I'm just looking through and I see a lot of very friendly names here on the attendee list. And I'll say for everyone here on this webinar that we look forward to seeing you in person hopefully soon. I know we all miss that, but until then we will do what this market does best, and we will use technology to solve problems. So I'm very thankful that we have webinar technology to help keep us all in sync during this time. So just to share, here at Ribbon, work continues at normal. We're very fortunate to have our hosted UC solution, Candy, and which many of you have deployed. And this has allowed us to really not skip a beat and just continued our work. So continued work in R&D, technical support, and obviously your sales and sales engineering teams are here. So our work is on track. For example, Lee will be on in a second, and he'll speak about C15, and that next release remains on schedule for general availability later this year. So if you need anything, definitely reach out. We're here to help. In addition to that, I just want to make sure everyone has heard, you probably already have heard, that Ribbon and ECI recently came together. And for those of you that are not aware, ECI has a very strong packet and optical solution, and it's very complementary to our existing portfolio. So it's bringing together everything from switching, whether that's on-premise or in the cloud, security, session border control, hosted applications, analytics from the core all the way out to the edge, and now adding in the packet and the optical layer. So we do have several webinars planned over the next couple of weeks going into more depth on the ECI portfolio. If you have not received an invitation to those, please reach out to me and I will ensure we get an invitation out to you. I'll post my contact information here in the chat window here in a second, but there may be people joining later and potentially listening to this on a recording. So if you need to reach me, my email address is epage@rbbn.com, and we'll make sure we get the invitations out. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lee King, but I'll stay here in the background and let me know of any questions you have. I'll be glad to help.
Okay,
Lee?
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
So let me just give a real quick state of the business update. This coronavirus is in front of everybody right now. We're all dealing with it. From a support perspective, the Ribbon team and also the Innovative Systems team, we're all working from home, but everyone is still online. We're still, it's business as usual as far as the support we provide. I keep looking at the number of cases we're getting and talking to the support guys to see what they're seeing out in the field. And so far, our case arrival rate is the same. It's steady. We haven't really seen any increase. We haven't seen any increase in outages or systems going into overload or anything like that. I've spoken with Greg about that. Innovative is seeing the same thing. We're not really seeing any big impacts yet. The one thing we are seeing is requests to facilitate work from home. So things like ACD or call forward or conference calls. Occasionally we're seeing some increase in RTUs for like SIP phones, things like that. But for the most part, in the IOC market, it's still just business as usual. Everything's working just fine. As far as Elizabeth mentioned software upgrades, release 17 is on track to be released in October. Release 16 went in service last October, and it's now running at about 174 sites, which makes it the most broadly deployed release that we currently have. Our upgrades continue to go. There are another 40 or so scheduled right now, and they're going steadily. We've seen like maybe 2 where a customer said that they wanted to defer their upgrade. So software upgrades really aren't being impacted very much. New deployments we're seeing a bit of a slowdown in new deployments and migrations where people don't want to have someone on site at their telco, but all the remote stuff seems to continue on. So that's pretty much the kind of the state of the business, what's going on. With that, let me get started with this presentation. So Greg, can you go to the next slide? So Carey's Law has been around for a little while. It's named after Carey Hunt, and this was a tragedy where tried to dial 911 and we're not successful at doing it because it was in a business group. For a while on the C15 and on the I also support the T7000. We've worked around or we've met the Carey's Law requirement for 911 with translations. That's been available for quite some time. There are some new aspects for Carey's Law and for Ray Baum's Act, which is what we're here to talk about today. There are penalties for non-compliance with this. This is federal legislation. This is not just an FCC guideline. So, this is a serious matter, and we've worked with Innovative Systems and put together a response to it. And Greg, could you go to the next slide, please? So Carey's Law is currently in effect, and the first 3 bullets here, that's, as I mentioned, we've been able to satisfy that for a while. The on-site notification to staff of who dialed 911, that's something new, and that's what we're delivering with this MLTS Notify feature. The idea there is, let's say you've got a hotel and someone's in a room and they dial 911, the front office would like to be notified of that. And the C15 will let the APMAX know that someone dialed 911, and then the APMAX will provide that notification. And Ray Baum's Act adds the ability to have a dispatchable location, and that is also facilitated by the Innovative Systems APMAX. So those are the 2 things that we've done. These both require enabling the feature on the APMAX. It doesn't require enabling anything on the C15 or the T7000, but it does require a patch on both of those. And in April, those patches are both available for C15. Release 16, Patch Bundle 4, will provide the capability needed for this. And for the T7000 on Release 7, a patch will be available by the end of this month. All right, Greg, can you go to the next slide, please?
Okay.
All right,
Thank you, Lee. So, like Lee mentioned, Greg Goldhammer here from Innovative Systems. Today we're going to talk about the MLTS E911 Notify service. So the next set of slides here in the deck, we're going to just kind of cover some of the same things that Lee covered earlier. And we're going to get into more of the configuration of the service at the end. And then we'll also take some questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the questions box there so we can try to get them answered for you today. So obviously the first thing, the reason this service is here is because of the federal regulations, wanting to be able to notify an on-site personnel person at a business, hotel, wherever it may be, that there has been an emergency service call generated from that location. And the service here provides that location information and helps guide that person, whether it's the front desk and the emergency service person, to the right place in the building. So the MLTS service is a service that runs on the APMAX system. Base 4.6 or newer. 4.6 is the latest. 4.7 is in beta right now and will be out sometime later in this the second quarter. The service is called 911 Notification, version 107 or greater. The service is a deployable service right on any current APMAX platform today. The service requires SS7 connectivity, either over T1 or S449, depending on your switching equipment. Like Lee mentioned, it also requires a patch on REL 16, and then will also be built into the REL 17 load coming out later this year. So first we want to kind of go into the fail-safe. The first thing everybody talks about is, well, if somebody picks up the handset or dials 911, what happens if there's a failure in the network? One thing that we took into account, and we take this very serious, that call needs to complete. A 911 call can't be blocked in any way. Lee and his design group went in and helped us out and created a way that this call will always complete, but will then notify us that the call may have failed for some reason. So in this slide here, I'm showing you a 911 notify fail. This was in their lab, but it's to give the person the reassurance that if the call is made, it completes successfully, but we also know that there was a failure on that call and we can fix that and go forward. So obviously if the SS7 goes down or whatever, it will still place that call and it'll work as expected. The next thing is everybody wants to know, well, what happens when a call's made? Well, when a call is made and we send out the message to the on-site person or personnel or multiple personnel, we send out an informational text email here in this slide stating the subject's a 911 call. It gives them the phone number that was calling, the location, so they can go to that place in the building. If you need more information, there's additional parameters that you can actually say, this is building A or B, or this is Hall, Jones Hall, or whatever. Maybe it's on a school campus. And it gives them that information. So the emergency service people can be directed into the right location and place for that emergency call. The next slide here is a test message. Within the MLTS service, you can do a test message. So you can mimic a 911 call just as somebody picked up the line. It goes through the same code base. It goes in, it hits a trigger, it does all the back end stuff it needs to do. In this case, the message would say test, same number that you tested from, or that earlier 911 call, but it has a subject of test, and then it also says was not placed, the call wasn't placed to the PSAP. So you can easily test it as you go and not worry about interrupting the PSAPs and alarming anybody. The next piece here, licensing. It's a licensable service. It's licensed by line, so it's licensed by every 1,000 lines or DNs that you put into the service. So if you have a office of 200 and you want all 200 lines on there, that's 200 of the 1,000 license that were applied to the system. And then you can buy expansions of 1,000 lines each. Going into logging, so we've seen the emails, we've seen the test email, the real email. We also keep track of all provisioning events for the MLTS. So if it's done via the UI or inside the user interface of the APMAX, or if it's done from the web portal side, where you have a managed administration person at that company or business that manages their numbers, we keep track of all of those provisioning events. So we want to keep track of who's putting numbers in, who's taking it out, that type of thing. That way there's no surprises when a number's added or removed or modified. So all those events are kept track of in the APMAX. We also keep track of every call that we receive an event for in the APMAX, so that we keep a redundant set of logs off of both Unit 1 and Unit 2, the system pair.
Hey, Greg, this is Lance. Just want to interject real quick. We have a lot of great questions coming in from the audience. Just want to say keep those coming. Lee and Elizabeth are answering some of those, and I'm sure we'll get some of them verbally as well towards the end of the webinar. So keep those questions coming, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. All right, Greg, back to you.
Yep, thanks, Lance. So now in my next slides here, we're going to dig into the provisioning side of it, the APMAX management side. So like any of the other services that we offer in the APMAX under the system configuration, you'll find the E911 configuration. Inside of this next window is where we get to put all the information in. As you can see by this chart here, it kind of flows from left to right as you build the company or business. In this case, that we called it data. Data is the actual MLT business name. The maybe it's a building name, business name, college campus, whatever, or a hall on the college campus. So that's your business or the parties that will be notified. Going across, then we go into the users tab. Users tabs are all the users that will be a web administrator that can manage that particular business that you've added. And just a note here, we'll cover these in more depth later in the slides here, so I'm just kind of going across. Then we have the service addresses. Service addresses is the physical address. This is the address that you'll see in the email. The 911 callers will be the phone numbers. Emergency call notification. This is like the hierarchy of the company or the campus or the motel. This would be the person that you always want to receive that email. So that emergency call notification is that party there. And then your provisioning notifications, that's the party that you want to notify that there's been changes made to any of the data inside the MLTS. Maybe going back to the service provider, it may be going back to the owner of the motel, maybe it's going to the dean of the school or superintendent or whoever. Okay. So the next slide here, so we've added Innovative Systems as our subscriber, and we're adding service addresses. So like I mentioned earlier, this is the physical address that they will receive from the email. So you can put in there the physical address, and then you can also put in the phone number that is inside that building. Additional information, we can put in there, building A, building B, office, whatever, and maybe it's floor 1, floor 2, things like that. So multi-level, multi-building, multi-hall, whether it's a school campus. So it's designed to allow you to put in that additional information to help direct the emergency service people. Next slide here. We're going into the next tab over, emergency call notifications. And like I mentioned, this is the party that will receive that email every time when a call is made from their business or from that data element that we added over there, Innovative Systems. This is the person that kind of manages or owns or wants to be privy to everything happening. So in this case, we have Kyle Music in there, and he will get the emails when 911 is called from our building. The next slide here, provisioning. So this is the party that wants to know when people modified the data in there. Service provider, maybe the IT manager of the building that manages the phone system, that type of thing. So when he modifies and adds a new line or removes a line, he can go in here and change his MLTS E911 information. So that is where that is assigned. The next tier, once you've added the data, the business, the users, and all of the notification, whether it's for notifications for provisioning or emergency calls, all of these can be edited. So this is the bottom section of that interface. Left to right again, data, add, delete. The next one, all of your add, edit, delete, and the test button for testing the service. So you can select the particular number you want to test, and you can test it right from there for that business, for that one number. So when you're setting these up, if you have 20, 50 numbers, you could test each number individually and make sure that the data looks correct in the email you receive. So under that add, as you can see, there's a down arrow in there. It allows you to go in there and add more service addresses. So let's say you changed the business and you've added a separate campus, or you've added a new building to your campus of buildings, and now you have one in a different location. You can add another service address to your current business and service address list. So now I have 1000 Innovative Drive here, and we added a building downtown that's down on Main Street, so we put that in there, and you don't have to redo what's already have. You can just add on to it and modify. Also in here, this is where you add your 911 caller. That's the phone number that would be dialing 911. So I add a new Main Street location. I add my phone numbers into that service address, and then add Karen or whoever the manager of that building is, and they would get this notification for 911 calls. Now I'm going to jump over to the web portal side. Web portal, I'm sure many of you are familiar with our kind of template cookie cutter model that we've used for web portal across all of our services in the APMAX, but very similar to that. The sign-in page, same type of sign-in page, same type of tool set to dig into configuration and accounts. Going across here from left to right, you have your users, you have your accounts, and then on the far right you have configuration. Configuration is obviously where most people will spend their time when they're in this web portal, which I'll jump to now. So web portal service address, or the configuration window. In here we give you all the flexibility to add the service addresses like we did over on the APMAX UI side, add the 911 caller, add the additional information and emergency notifications, things like that. You can add and remove them. Any changes in here will reflect an email going out to the provisioning person, and they'll see that information so they know that there's changes being made. Tool set on the right, you have your green plus mark to add, and your little red garbage can to delete, and then also the red gear at the bottom there for pulling up and adding a new user. So maybe you want to pass over some of the responsibilities to somebody else. You can add a user, delete a user, that type of thing, if you have the correct rights. Okay. Just to go through what it looks like when I hit the add button pops up. Oh, I want to add this emergency notification, a new email address. Ask me what type of notification it is. It's an email. Add my address. I get a pop-up. I type in my email address, and then I click OK. Takes you in there and puts that new email on there, and obviously this party will get a notification when 911 is called from that service address. The next one, very similar, provisioning, same concept. all of the web tools and the windows inside the web portal are all the same. Each one across from left to right will mirror each other, so it's very simple to learn and not overly complicated. And then, like I mentioned, the little blue dot over there with the gear in it, if I want to add a user or a subscriber that can manage these tools, and I'm going to pass off some of those rights to him, they can do so if they'd like. Okay. So user control. One of the things we thought about also for we're tracking all our provisioning. Now we need to kind of cut down and slice apart what people can do. So user rights have different levels. If you have a service control rights, which would be like your service provider, you can manage and change anything on any of the subscribers or the businesses. You can lower those rights to just a particular business. You can lower your rights to just a particular address inside that business. So if I want Lee to be able to manage my 1000 Innovative Drive and I want Elizabeth to manage the 2000 South Main, I can give them individual rights to the portal to make those changes for just their service area. So we've looked at this and we've taken a lot of time to handle the rights so we can make it very granular for the customers. So that's all I have. We'll look through the questions here and try to answer some if we can, or take them offline.
So Greg, there was a couple of questions that came in. Let me ask you these. Can more than one contact be notified?
Yes. Yes, so in there what we would do is you could put a string of emails or you can put them in there individually. And the whole concept is you can put as many as you want. There's really no technical limit on why you can't have 20, but yes, you can.
There's another question. Is there a character limitation in the additional information field?
That is set by the FCC, and I can get that data. I don't have that character limit ingrained into my brain right now, but there is. That's all set by the FCC, and I can sure provide that. Okay.
Another question. What if phones from multiple different physical locations share the same outgoing number DID? Can there still be notification, the extensions, and send the physical appropriate location information?
So, and that's a question, and that's something that we've kind of kicked around in the office. So in that case, you have two phones registered or bound to the same line. It gets very difficult to know who called what, and the additional information really needs to be provided. Could be possibly option A or B. There's no way to know the difference, and that's something that's not solved at this time.
Okay. Another question, is the notification only via email?
Yes, today it's only email, or you can use a SMS gateway. So it would be at whatever your phone number might be at your SMS gateway provider's address, whether it's Verizon or AT&T.
Okay. There's another question. Section 506 of Array Bonds Act requires that a dispatchable location is conveyed with 911 calls, so the 911 call centers will receive the caller's location automatically and can dispatch responders more quickly. Is this service only an email alerting service, or does it actually send this information along to the 911 center?
This is only an email alerting service. It does not provide that information to the PSAP. I think in January of 2021, there will need to be another bolt-on piece that will do that. That information needs to go across the actual call to the PSAP and provide that additional information. So there's some wiring there that needs to be done.
And some of that is outside of the soft switch. That's the interaction between the telco and the PSAP. It's not just the message, the sending the call from the C15 or the T7000 to the PSAP.
Correct.
Another question, would this service help to identify the specific location on an MLTS if an extension dials 911 from a line group?
From a line group.
I think that's similar to the question you answered.
Yeah, I would think that.
Ago.
Yeah, I think if they're in the same physical location, yes, it would work as expected. If it's, they're not, we're going to be in the same condition that we were before with a multi-bind.
Okay. Another question is, when do we contact IS to get this service added? The answer to that is that this is available now, or you can contact your ribbon or your innovative salesperson and get scheduled to have this applied. There's a question, what is the difference between emergency and provisioning notifications?
So what we do there is the emergency notification is the top level manager of maybe that motel, hotel, or the dean of the school. The provisioning is whoever may maintain their internal phone system. So it might be the head of the IT department or whatever. They are getting just provisioning updates from the provisioning notification. The emergency notifications getting the actual 911 calls when they're being made. And then underneath your service address, you have the actual maybe manager of that group of people or those types of roles so that are closer to the actual caller.
Okay. Another question, does this help the telcos with mobile SIP users to fulfill their obligation for the customers to update their E911 address?
No.
All right, and can this be a chargeable service to the customer, to the end customer?
I would say probably not, since it was a federal regulation, but you would have to read the guidelines there.
Okay. There's another question here. Does this comply with both Ray Baum's Act and Kerry's Law? And the answer to that is, we believe that this meets the requirements that have been phased in so far. Greg just mentioned there continues to be stuff that comes in, and we'll address that as they become regulations. If a call is made from room 300 of a hotel and a number, will the room number be made available to the PSAP?
So in the case of this service, the MLTS, the email notification will have the room number on it. If the once we bolt in and send that information to the PSAP, it would, but at this time, no, not unless it's being sent inside of the call.
Yeah. One other thing on the dispatchable locations. So in release 16 on C15, we added the ability to have an expanded location parameter in SIP messages, and the C15 doesn't populate that field. It will pass the information on. So for example, if you've got a phone, and we tested this with Polycom, you can put an expanded location in, and then that gets passed as a SIP header along with the call to the destination. We also added the ability to support SIP 911 trunks, and we haven't seen a lot of deployment of that. So in the real world, I'm not sure if there's a good mechanism for delivering that SIP header to a PSAP end to end, just because I'm not sure all the infrastructure for it exists. There's a question about, since AIN signaling occurs between the C15 and the APMAX for MLTS Notify, the 911 traffic can be either in-band, ISUP, SIP, or PSAP, or SIP to the PSAP. And correct is the answer to that. Greg, there's a question about as additional requirements come into play for this Ray Bombs Act, the one you just mentioned a moment ago, would that just be added on to the offering that we're providing, or would there be an additional license for that, for example?
Yeah, at this time, I would say it's going to be just a bolt-on, and it depends on where we put it. So for most of the parts that we're looking at going forward, they'll be pushed right into this service. I don't believe there would be any additional charge at this time.
So unless something drastically changes, our expectation is that this offering will meet the requirements, and as the requirements evolve, the offer will evolve also. Yep. A question, do you recommend that each location have a separate DID if there are multiple locations? That would certainly be one way to address the problem that several people have asked questions about. Here's another question. Phones with multiple DIDs with the same main telephone number, for example, we have a business office and a conference room and garage in separate buildings using the same main number. How could this be separated since the extensions are not available at this time?
Yeah, that's definitely one of those gotcha questions there, and it's also a gotcha because if they're sharing a line and they're in different locations, the additional information needs to be privy that it gives them all three, and there's no way to really separate them at this time.
Okay. So that's the last question we have for right now. And this has been a lot of questions. In all the webinars I've done, I think this has been the most questions we've had. So, a lot of interest there. We really appreciate that. So,
Okay.
Greg, do you have anything else you want to add, or we'll turn it back over to Lance?
No, I think if you have any questions, reach out. Obviously, Lee's group and the IS group are here to help you. So, yeah, reach out and let us know what you're thinking. And if you have questions, let us know. Thanks, Lee.
All right. Thanks, Greg.